be asking, what exactly are they? A verb that describes both a mental or physical action. So think of them as something that you would be doing. Action verbs are important because this is going to be going at the very beginning of all of your bullet points within your experience section. So this is one of those very first impressions you can make about what the content of your experience is going to hold. I think it's important to talk a bit about tense. It may seem a little bit straightforward, but I think it's helpful to go over anyway. If you have a past experience, so let's say something that has ended either relatively recently or relatively distantly in the past. So take this example. You potentially were a data analyst intern at Amazon, and you worked there from March 2020 until May 2020. This ending date's the really important part. Because you finished this experience, you're going to have all of your action verbs as well as the tense of the entire experience section be all in past tense. So what that means for a lot of action verbs is they're going to end in ed. If you are still currently working at that job, an important thing to keep in mind is that we aren't going to, even if you know the date that you're going to finish there, we're not going to put a date that exists in the future on your resume. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to summarize that by just saying your beginning dates. So let's say your start date was in March 2020. If your ending date, you know, is going to be in August 2020, until August 2020 comes, you are just going to maintain present. So that's all that you need to put there to indicate you're still working at this. What that's also going to mean for your action verbs is they're all going to move to present tense. With this present tense or current experience, you're going to begin it with analyze data sets. So just a quick thing to keep in mind as you go through and write your action verbs out. So with this, I like to think that even within action verbs, there are some that are a little bit more dynamic than others. So I've got a few listed off to the side here. Coordinated, designed, launched, reduced, analyzed, defined. These are all action verbs that really inspire some energy. The actions that you took, they give a bit of understanding about the scope of the work that you were doing. Instead, I think there's also some more static action verbs. So what do I mean by that? These action verbs read a little bit weaker than the action verbs maybe we listed previously. So some of these that I typically encourage students to pull away from are words like assisted, helped, completed, worked, and communicated. Now, this doesn't mean if you have this in your resume is a bad resume. The point with these being static is more so that with assisted and helped, they're so vague. It's really hard for even somebody who isn't an employer to get a good idea about the amount of work that you did. So an example with this might be, you could say that you assisted somebody in writing a book, but maybe all that you did to help them was put together their table of contents. It would mean something very different if somebody also had that same experience and said assisted somebody in completing a book, but in reality, they co-wrote that book. So half of the work of creating that book was on them as well. So I think that's the troubling thing with using words like assisted and helped. It's hard to quantify how much you actually provided, and it takes on kind of a more passive role. With words like completed, worked, and communicated, I think these ones are a little bit trickier to use, and again, it's fine if they're in your resume, but I typically avoid them because those are three things I think any employer would hope you would be doing through the duration of your internship, project, or experience. You should be completing your work, you should be working, and you should be talking to people. So those are just a few quick tips. I'm going to have a document attached into this module for you to be able to review and help you think of maybe some additional action verbs. It can help you to really distinguish your experience and draw people